Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the neuroscience of pleasure. We're going to look at a really fascinating study that shows what things like sex, food, and even music all have in common, on a deep biological level. Okay, let's kick things off with a question that, I know, might sound a little weird at first, but trust me, it gets right to the core of what we're talking about today. So, what do sex and dessert actually have in common? Well, the answer is they both follow a master script that's hardwired into your brain. It's something called the pleasure cycle, and it's basically a fundamental blueprint that guides how we experience all kinds of rewarding things. Right, so let's break down this whole script for pleasure. I mean, how does this one cycle have such a huge influence over so many of our behaviors? So this whole idea comes from a 2012 study published in Progress in Neurobiology. And what it suggests is that our drive for things like food and sex, well, it isn't just a switch that's always flicked to on. Instead, it's more like a wave. It flows through these really distinct phases as we, find something we want, chase after it, and then finally get to enjoy it. And you've definitely felt this before, right? It's sometimes called selective satiation. Think about it. You're completely stuffed after a big dinner. No way you could eat another bite. But then someone brings out a slice of cake. And suddenly, you've got room. This is a perfect example of a fascinating parallel between food and sex. A little bit of novelty can totally restart the pleasure cycle from scratch. Okay, so the first absolutely crucial phase of this cycle is what neuroscientists call wanting. This is really where the whole process kicks off. Right, so this first part of that curve, the wanting phase, this is all about the buildup. It's the motivation, the anticipation, that desire. It's the engine that drives us to seek out a reward. And it can be triggered by something outside of us, like seeing an attractive person, or something inside, like a hunger pang. And look, this distinction is so important. You have to separate these two ideas in your mind. The easiest way to think about it is this. Wanting is the chase, and liking is the reward. They are two totally separate, distinct processes happening in the brain. One's all about motivation and desire, and the other is about the actual feeling of pleasure. So deep inside your brain, there's this specific network of regions that just lights up during the wanting phase. They call it the sexual interest network, and you can see the key parts of it here. Now, you don't need to memorize all these names, but just think of them as a team. Their one job is to spot a potential reward out there and then point all of our motivation right at it. All right, so after the chase comes the prize. And that brings us to the next major phase of the cycle, the actual experience of pleasure. This is what the researchers call liking. So now we're at the very peak of that curve you saw. The liking phase is all about the experience itself, the consumption and the sensation. This is that moment of intense pleasure, which in this case builds up to an orgasm. After this peak, the cycle starts to wind down towards satisfaction. And during this liking phase, your brain just completely shifts gears. The focus narrows down to nothing but the immediate sensory experience. It's a state that's all about promoting intimacy and tuning out every other distraction, so you can be totally immersed in that one moment. And to pull this off, the brain actually switches to a totally different neural network. This one is called the sexual arousal network. So if the first network was the spotter and the seeker, you can think of this second one as the doer. It's the hands-on machinery that handles all the physical sensations and actions of the experience itself. Okay, but this is where things get really interesting. So we have these two networks, this whole cycle for sex. But what happens when you compare it to the pleasure cycles for other things? Well, after looking at all the brain imaging evidence they could find, the authors of that 2012 study came to a pretty startling conclusion. I mean, they said, and I'm quoting here, "It is unlikely that there is anything special about the brain mechanisms and networks underlying sex." Let that sink in. In other words, even though it feels so unique and profound, the actual machinery in the brain running the show, it's not special at all. Just think about what that really means for a second. Our brains don't have some special VIP section just for sex. Nope. Instead, they're using the exact same core reward machinery for pretty much everything we enjoy, from a good meal to listening to our favorite song to just connecting with other people. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Why should you care that our brain uses this one-size-fits-all pleasure cycle for so many different experiences? Well, it reveals something really profound. It means our most fundamental drives, our drive for food, for social connection, for reproduction, they're not running on separate specialized apps. They're all running on a shared neural operating system. It's this one common thread that connects all of our most powerful motivations. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. If our most profound pleasures, from love to a good meal, are all running on the same basic brain software, what does that tell us about what truly makes us happy? It kind of suggests that maybe, just maybe, the foundation of our well-being is built on a much simpler and more unified system than we ever thought possible.